here today to teach you all about exponential finance and one of the most interesting landscapes today, which is Bitcoin and blockchain technology. So in the beginning, there was one, the genesis of the next generation of our financial future. Now, how many of you in this room know what Bitcoin is? That's awesome. That's a huge difference from giving this speech in like 2013 or 14. How many of you own Bitcoin? Interesting. How many of you know what the blockchain is? Fabulous. So Bitcoin was created in 2009 by anonymous Satoshi Nakamoto. Now, his reason for launching this project anonymously is an ideological one, because Bitcoin, in contrast to current systems of finance, is not about one. It's not about a tribe leader controlling a ledger. It's not about a king doing the same. It's not about a Federal Reserve Bank or a central state holding control, ownership, and rights. Bitcoin in and of itself is all of us. Now, after that white paper was released, we had several interesting things happen in the early days of Bitcoin. Someone in 2010 bought a pizza for 10,000 Bitcoin that is now a almost $29 million pizza. And Bitcoin had some rough times too. We went through the trough of disillusionment in 2013 when an exchange called Mt. Gox, which was essentially a fractional reserve exchange, which antithetical to the whole Bitcoin network. Anyone who knew what was happening in Bitcoin knew that Mt. Gox was a bit of a cracked exchange. They were using for their underlying protocol Magic the Gathering, which is essentially a trading card game similar to World of Warcraft, processing $200 to $300 million a day, and they were essentially two guys sitting in a basement in Japan. That is really scary, especially if you're putting a lot of money into an exchange like that. And so the exchange crashed. They were using double spend to hyperinflate the price of Bitcoin, went to $200, and now we are back up at $2,800 for the entire ecosystem. So after we had this rough patch, we were able to move forward and create something extremely meaningful. And we're still in the early adopter stage of this technology. Now, this is a spreadsheet. This is not a blockchain. A lot of people confuse spreadsheets and distributed databases with blockchains. And there are some core fundamental differences between something like a spreadsheet and something like a blockchain. I'll get into that in a second. So Bitcoin, people have called it a money, they've called it an asset, a million different things, but at the core of what this technology is, it's just a protocol. It's an open source protocol like TCP/IP, like the standard mail protocol, and it has an extremely interesting property in terms of the way that it quantifies and distributes information, because really that's all money is. Money is just information. Bitcoin is both inherently scarce. There are only 21 million Bitcoin in existence that will ever exist, and it is also easily replicable. That is why Bitcoin's called the Internet of Money, because anyone can take the Bitcoin blockchain and create their own form of currency. Now, there is kind of a caveat to that, in that I will say the current state of the market, while extremely exciting, we are in a bubble. And that's because people are creating currencies like Feathercoin or Fedora Coin, which have absolutely no tangible underlying value. But people can, hyperinflate the market, pump up the value of the currency, and dump the currency to buy extremely cheap Bitcoin. That is a problem that exists in our landscape today and something that we have to solve. So Bitcoin is not the internet. It is the Internet of Money. And there is a way to create an ethical and responsible cryptocurrency, whether using Bitcoin or another blockchain like Ethereum. I'll teach you how to do that a little bit later. So Bitcoin is the Internet of Money, and blockchain is the Internet of Value. We have Bitcoin Big B, which is the protocol, little b, which is the money, and blockchain, which is the underlying technology, the core infrastructure. So this enables some very, very, very interesting things. With a blockchain, which is a decentralized, immutable public ledger, we have peer-to-peer transfer of assets, ownerships, and rights, meaning we eliminate many middlemen who come into systems to scrape an excess profit, capitalizing on our deep human need for trust. Blockchain is an inherently trustless system, as all identities are pseudo-anonymous and the information is completely public, verified by every person in the network at large. We also solve the double spend issue, as once a Bitcoin is created, it's like matter or energy. It cannot be created or destroyed. It merely is. And its movements through the network are tracked by every person in the network and genuinely every person in the world at large. That's because of public-private key cryptography, which is way more secure and way less expensive than things like the chip cards, which banks just spent a significant amount of money to upgrade. And the benefits of that in terms of where technology is today, I have some serious reservations about. So frictionless, low-cost payments, the only thing you need is the internet. Now, this has the potential to evolve and destroy some extremely large financial systems in our world today. And it is my hope that regardless of what happens in the future, we do what is best for humanity at large. So one of the core differences between a spreadsheet and a blockchain is a spreadsheet is a centralized ledger. You can have a bunch of different people editing it at once, but you cannot have an editable blockchain. That is absolutely antithetical to why a blockchain is so important. A blockchain is trustless because we cannot edit the information once it exists. And ownership is fundamentally distributed through every person who is running a node on the network, not one central authority. Boom. So these are 3 different types of infrastructures that people have been using or are going to use in the future. We have centralized infrastructures, which is essentially how almost every system has worked today. You have a pyramid where you have the CEO and management, and then all of the employees at the bottom. And a decentralized infrastructure is at the core of how Bitcoin works. It means that you have nodes distributed all across the network who are running their own world and allowing other people to come into that gravity, contribute, participate, engage, and earn value. Now, a distributed infrastructure is something that a lot of corporations and private organizations are thinking about using to get into blockchain. I call these like blockchain light. In that if you actually look, a distributed infrastructure, where's that? Yeah, distributed infrastructure and a centralized infrastructure are really quite similar. It's just looking at it from a different angle because that distributed infrastructure does maintain one central point of failure. So there are certainly use cases for private blockchains, but in terms of universal humanitarian impact, the technology should be public, available, distributed to everyone on the planet. So what is a blockchain? It is borderless. It is public like the internet, available to all. It is voluntary, which means you get to choose where your data goes, who has access to that information, where you collaborate, where you participate, and where you share. It is decentralized, which means there's no central point of failure, there's no central point of authority, and it is immutable, which means fundamentally, once that information is entered into a blockchain, it can never be erased. So the Bitcoin blockchain is by far the most powerful blockchain that exists to date, but it's not the only one. So Bitcoin mining is essentially a process where we have supercomputers all over the planet in areas where energy is extremely low cost. And to speak to Ramez's amazing speech, it's an energy problem to use Bitcoin mining because you essentially have warehouses full of supercomputers with ASICs explicitly designed to do one function, which is to mine and create Bitcoin. Now, all of these computers are trying to solve these insanely complex math problems at once. And every time they try to solve a math problem, they have a 50% chance of solving that correctly, which means it's provably fair. It's like taking a bet. You have a 50-50 chance of getting it right every single time you participate in the system. Once one of the computers gets a math problem right, which, by the way, the complexity of getting one of these questions right to earn Bitcoin as a computer, there were literally more grains of sand that existed on Earth in 2014. There was a higher likelihood you as a human would find one grain of sand on Earth because these problems have an exponentially increasing difficulty rate in terms of solving them. But once one of these computers gets it right, every other computer in the world goes, they applaud, they validate the computer for solving the problem correctly, and that computer receives Bitcoin, which is entered into a block of information that is chained to every other block in the network, hence a blockchain. And every time that information moves, from the moment it is created, it is recorded and validated in the same way that these supercomputers create Bitcoin. So this is how to use Bitcoins: download a wallet on your computer, send it to any person in the world, peer-to-peer. Your public key is like your email address. Your private key is like your password. You can just get someone's public key and instantly send them money frictionlessly and peer-to-peer in the same way that you could send someone an email with information. And that is how a blockchain works, as I just explained. Anytime you send Bitcoin to someone, you enter in a block of information. That block of information is chained to all of the other blocks of information in the network, and you send value to someone anywhere in the world. So some really interesting things become possible with this. A secure transaction ledger database, you have smart contracts, you have elimination of trusted third parties, cost reduction, the elimination of error handling, and fundamentally automation of financial systems. Now, this also enables an extraordinary landscape for entrepreneurs, centered around primarily digital identity, smart contracts, digital assets, and distributed applications. These are just a few of the hundreds of thousands of use cases in terms of the way this technology can and will redefine the world. Because Bitcoin, at its core, really, is just information. So if you think about it this way, Bitcoin takes the business model of the technology industry, of any industry really, and flips it on its head. We're in a transition right now from capitalism to protocolism, which essentially means in the old system, I am a user of Facebook, and here's Facebook. To use Facebook, which is a public service, I use Facebook for free. They give me access to the network for free, and I give them my data, which they then sell to other enterprise organizations to make advertising dollars. Now, fundamentally, it's a step in the right direction, but you cut the little guy out of the equation. You can't really invest in Facebook unless you wait until they IPO, but you're cut out of the fundraising process if you're not an institutional investor. So that means you get the value of using the network, but you don't actually have equitable distribution of financial opportunity. Now, with Bitcoin, things change a little bit. Well, things change a lot. You have something called an ICO, which essentially both inverts business models and models of financing. Now, what that explicitly means is that instead of doing an IPO, where I as a user might buy stock for $5 and then in 10 years it could be worth 50, I as a user of a platform can sign up and get tokens for just merely giving someone my information, for signing up for a system, or by purchasing crypto equity. That means any person in the world can get involved in a fundraising process anytime through the life cycle of the project. And fundamentally, how those tokens have value is by, again, flipping that business model on its head. Because I, as a user in the system, because we're using public-private key cryptography, I own my data. And not only that, but as a blockchain business, I couldn't sell that information even if I wanted to, because the data set is public. And in a blockchain business, that's actually what you are taking ownership in. You are taking ownership in a monetizable public data set that is quantifying the intangible Earth. Things like climate health, ocean health. All of that is information that we have been unable to reap value from in the past. And that is actually how blockchain technology enables a new generation of financial abundance. Blockchain at the core is quantified information. And an initial coin offering is your ability to get into these projects at a very early stage. So the computing power of Google is 1 petahash. To give you perspective on the size and scope of the Bitcoin network, the computing power of the Bitcoin network is 525 petahash. That means one Google One Bitcoin network equals 525 Googles. Now, keep in mind, Google is a large and complex organization with many different people and many different moving pieces. But Bitcoin actually represents a broader shift in that it is something that is hyperlocal, central, solving one function, reducing complexity, and using ASIC chips that serve one specific purpose, and that is to create the Bitcoin networks. And those are the protocols in the future where you should look to invest, because that is the area that is going to produce and generate the most value. So Bitcoin is to blockchain as email is to the internet. It is fundamentally the first use case of a technology whose implications will extend beyond what 99% of the planet can even imagine in this stage. This is crazy. The market cap of Bitcoin is almost $50 billion. When every time I do this presentation, I have to keep updating the slide. Less than a month ago, it was just $20 billion. Once we passed, I told you about Mt. Gox earlier, who inflated the Bitcoin price to 1,200 before it crashed back down to its actual rate. Once Bitcoin crossed the $1,200 mark, investors said, oh wait, it's actually real. So every person who felt they missed the opportunity got back into the market in an incredible way. Over the last month, the value of Bitcoin has risen $970. That means Bitcoin has a larger market cap. I know it says 61% up here. It's actually 70% of countries in the world. In fact, it sits right at 52.5 on the CIA's M1 data for the wealth of all nations, right above Chile, right under Libya. We're just about to surpass Gaddafi. So this is an absolutely, I'm in this world and I'm still blown away by this information. That's absolutely nuts. It's only existed since 2009. And already the value of this currency is nearly more than 50% of nations on Earth. That's insane. And we are still in the early adopter phase. So we can expect to see the value of this currency really create an exponential shift in the way that we think about not only global finance, but the distribution and the abundance of money, wealth, value at large. So I told you earlier about proof of work, which is all of the little computers solving the math problems and then getting a bunch of Bitcoin. The other way that you can create essentially a blockchain value system is by using proof of stake. Proof of stake is what you use when you are creating an ICO, and it simply means you're purchasing crypto equity and taking ownership in a network that you believe is going to contain a valuable public data set, valuable information. And that is the world of the initial coin offering. So essentially, as I said earlier, this not only redistributes finance, but allows us to really take ownership in the invisible, unquantified information that has existed and has not been able to be valued in a distributed way since literally the dawn of man. And there are multiple blockchains. So we have the Bitcoin blockchain. We have Lisk, which is essentially an SDK for Bitcoin. We have MadeSafe, which is the little triangle. It's essentially blockchain storage. We have Ripple, which looks like the three little balls run together by a string. That's blockchain for banks. And we have a very interesting use case in something called Steemit. It's these three blue lines. It's essentially a monetized blogging platform for Medium, and monetized blogging platform like Medium. And while it could still be an economic experiment, the first time I heard about Steemit, I had someone message me to tell me about it, and they said, hey, just wanted to send you a screenshot of this. I just made $26,000 telling people what my favorite kind of carrot was. And I said, what? I was like, that's gotta be a joke. And he said, no, you need to go check it out. It rose at one point to number 3 in CoinMarketCap, which is displaying all the value of all the cryptocurrencies in the world. And it may just be an economic experiment, but it certainly shows the way in which we can take these things like content that are generating value from people all over the world and actively assign a tradable, valuable asset to that. So the total market cap of this entire industry within the last 2 days just surpassed $100 billion. And we are still, folks, yes, we are still in the early adopter stage. So that's all Bitcoin is, really. The future of money is actually the future of information. And what the internet did for information at large, information that was at once owned by church, by state, by tribe leader, by central reserve, it took that and it gave it to all of us. It put the power in our hands to own it, to create it, to share it. Blockchain gives us the opportunity not only to be that information, but to receive financial value from that. What the internet did for information, the blockchain is going to do for the world of money and value at large. And in the next century, it may not even be something that we think about. Bitcoin's information, just like contracts are information, just like you. You are information, I am information. We are all just information. This is a fundamental change in the ownership models of the world that we have lived in today. Financial markets today, GE has made more money since the 80s trading financially than they have actually producing products. This red line is the number of people working jobs up top. Below it, that's the actual amount of wealth in our economy dedicated to those people who make their income working jobs. Most of the wealth in the United States is stored in margins and dividends, and this is the reason why we have such vast and horrible inequality. That changes with the blockchain. We are moving from capitalism to protocolism, where any person in the world has the opportunity at the inception of a project to become a shareholder, to own, create, store value. So at the core, what is a blockchain? Borderless, voluntary, decentralized, and immutable. What are the paradigm shifts this technology can create? The redistribution of wealth and the demonetization of defunct currencies. Venezuela is about to experience a revolution. A bag of flour costs $313. People there are starving, hungry, and forsaken at the expense of a regime whose ownership was outside of their control. We no longer need the church to give us a connection with any idea of God. It still is useful, though, in some ways, right, for some people. I'm a pluralist, so no judgment. But we no longer need the state to give us access to define our relationship to law. Universal access to rights is also something that blockchain technology is going to empower in an extraordinary way. In fact, my company, BitNation, it is essentially a system for self-sovereign identities, the world's virtual nation, a blockchain jurisdiction. 88% of the world does not allow LGBTQ couples to get married. 23 countries allow LGBTQ marriage. 15 countries allow you to kill someone for being gay. That is the state of the world we live in. We use the blockchain to allow people to register their marriage anonymously on the BitNation platform, because we don't need the state to create a system of law for people who are living in an environment that wakes them up every day to a wall of oppression and disillusionment. The dematerialization of things, which means the information contained in the ocean, the information contained in the climate, in the health of mangroves, all of these things that have been invisible to us are now going to be able to be quantified, valued, shared, traded, and exchanged. The decentralization or deeper distribution of powers, and fundamentally the systemic restructuring of ownership models. Thank you so much for all of your time today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your experience, and if you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to reach out to me because I am happy to help all of you. Thank you.